Okay, there is some actual value here. I like this trade a lot. I know, upon first glance, you look at the players, you look at where they're playing, and you'll say, Lego, what are you talking about? This is a minor trade, bro. Look at you hyping up trades just because they include names that you happen to recognize. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit part of it. But the reason I recognize these players is because there is some good potential here, and it's why I actually do think this is an underrated trade from both sides. The Winnipeg Jets and Chicago Blackhawks are finalizing a trade. It is Dmitry Kuzmin from Winnipeg to Chicago for Isaac Phillips. Seems like a one-for-one deal. Phillips for Kuzmin. Now, upon first glance, you might realize that both of these guys are from non-traditional hockey countries. Isaac Phillips is born in Ontario, but he is of Jamaican ancestry, so he does have that little Jamaica flag on his name. Dmitry Kuzmin, hey, guess what? He's from Belarus, so that's really interesting to see going over to Chicago, but both of these guys are young defensemen, but they're very different defensemen. Isaac Phillips is 23 years old, 6'3", 205, left-handed guy, signed on till the end of this year. He was a fifth-round pick by the Blackhawks back in the 2020 NHL entry draft. Meanwhile, Dmitry Kuzmin is not a bigger fifth-round pick from 2020. He's a little younger. He's 21 years old, 5'10", 187, a left-handed guy, signed on till the end of one season from now in 25-26, he was a 2021 third-round guy by the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Dmitry Kuzmin, we'll get into him a little bit later, but for Isaac Phillips, this is a guy who has slowly started to mix himself in with a lot of the other younger defensemen the Blackhawks have had. Obviously, 2020 fifth-round pick, you're not going to expect too much out of a guy who was taken in this range, but he was a draft-eligible player out of the Sudbury Wolves. He had 26 points in 63 games played, but was primarily noted for his size and the way he was able to move. He ended up playing with the Rockford Ice Hogs just the next year and found himself on the Chicago Blackhawks the year after at 19 years old. He had 4 games played, 0 points, but still, getting that cup of coffee definitely is valuable. He then rounded his game out up and down in Rockford and Chicago and Rockford and Chicago. This season, he has 1 goal in 3 games with the Chicago Blackhawks. I believe it came against the Philadelphia Flyers, if I'm not mistaken. If we scroll down over here, the Anaheim Ducks, excuse me. Yeah, I got my orange teams mixed up. But Isaac Phillips is a guy with some really interesting tools. Yes, he is big, so he's a lot more primarily going to be focused on the defensive zone, but there are some offensive tools that he has too. He can skate with the puck. He's not afraid to go end to end, which is actually one of these unique qualities that he brings. Even on a team like Chicago, he's still finding ways to kind of start the rush by himself and just get through guys. He's got some hands, he's got some feet. He can actually move pretty well here. And this tweet by Jet Effect on Twitter goes out there and says, hey, I'm reading and watching scouting reports on Isaac Phillips. He seems like a similar player to Dylan Samberg. 6'3", 205, two-way defenseman who can move his feet as well as the puck. Isaac Phillips already had himself many cups of coffee with the Chicago Blackhawks throughout his career, but with Chicago having so many extra young defensemen and some other guys that are a little bit older, like the Seth Joneses of the world, it's difficult for a guy like Phillips to fully break out and find himself on the team full-time. Now, will he have an easier time doing that in Winnipeg? Who really knows? But the fact is here, he's getting traded 1-for-1 for a defenseman, so it does make sense from a positional transaction point of view. If you go over to Dmitry Kuzmin, he's a guy whose name I was very familiar with back when he was at draft eligible. He's 21 now, but drafted in the 3rd round back in 2021. You can see he even had himself a scouting report on elite prospects. He works give and goes from the point, he reads hands-off. Shouldn't that say handoffs? Yeah, no, it's pluralized on the offs, not on the hand. Reads hands-offs. Hands-offs is like an entirely other different thing. Oh, keep your hands off. Anyways, he reads handoffs, fills space, and stays low when activated. He's an offensive zone possession extender. There's no locking to the point. He skates down the middle or down low when the puck comes to the point, then he dips behind his man and cuts inside. The biggest highlight you will see out of Dmitry Kuzmin is the fact that as a puck-moving, offensively minded defenseman, back at the U18s in his draft-eligible season, he scored a freaking Michigan goal. Yeah, this dude, for the Belarusian Defense Corps, scored a freaking Michigan goal. And it's always been one of the highlights of his game, his offensive prowess, and his ability to cut in and force offense whilst being a mobile, small-ish defenseman. Think Dominic Fensori, Lane Hudson kind of deal. That's sort of what you're getting out of Dmitry Kuzmin. Of course, maybe not to the same extent as a Lane Hudson, but still, the skill set, that's kind of what he has made his bread and butter as. He then played in the OHL a year after being drafted with the Flint Firebirds, had 44 points in 57 games, also had himself 59 points in 65 games the year after that, before finding himself in the AHL and the ECHL. This season, he has needed a change of scenery. He only had 4 points in 21 games with the Manitoba Moose. It didn't really seem like they were taking advantage of the skills that he had and just the tools that he was able to display. This is also one of the things that I think we can refer to. Mitch Brown tweeted this about Kuzmin back in 2021 when he was initially drafted. "I love the Dmitry Kuzmin pick by Winnipeg. He's a creative, manipulative, offensive player, constantly activating into the play. His defensive skating requires tweaking, but he's a strong instinctual defender who kills plays early. He's also a 3-time lacrosse goal scorer this season." Yeah, so I stand corrected. This guy had 3 lacrosse goals as a draft-eligible defenseman in the Belarusian League. He had 12 points in 46 games played in the top Belarusian League when he was over there, which is really great for a young player, a guy who at the time was only 17 years old, which is why he got drafted super highly anyway. I mean, 3rd-round guy, not super highly, but he's from Belarus, so obviously there was some value there. But Kuzmin heading over to Chicago, it's a pretty good bet for the Blackhawks. Anders Sorensen called this trade a fresh start for Phillips, who has been crowded out by the Blackhawks' massive young D-man. Meanwhile, Dmitry Kuzmin is a 21-year-old D-man from Belarus who, among other things, could give Artem Levshunov a friend from his home country. So there also is some sort of a camaraderie thing that seems like this trade can bring Chicago, which obviously wouldn't be like the main reason they bring him in, but it's one of the extra reasons that I do think adds value to this player for this team. If Artem Levshunov is able to make that transition to North American hockey alongside of a countryman like Dmitry Kuzmin, somebody who also happens to play defense, it could be a pretty good stepping stone and a good path towards success for both of these players. Now, I don't want to say that Dmitry Kuzmin is ever going to make the NHL and be a significant top 4 Lane Hudson-leaning defenseman, but if he eventually gets maybe a game or 2 over the next little while here, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's 21 years old. If they really wanted to give him a chance, we had seen the Blackhawks literally do this with Isaac Phillips, who had come into the lineup once in a while over the past 4 years or so. So Chicago, they have a lot of young D-men. Isaac Phillips, he's a guy who's probably good enough to play in a bottom pair 7th D role at the NHL level. We'll see if he does that in Winnipeg, though, because Winnipeg is pretty good with their D-core. I mean, a lot of the guys there have been pretty strong, Morrissey and Pionk especially, but Isaac Phillips heading over to Winnipeg, this is a good mature ad for their team. Dmitry Kuzmin over to Chicago, this is a great skilled ad, a high ceiling ad for their prospect pool. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about this trade. Dmitry Kuzmin for Isaac Phillips. It seems like it's 1 for 1. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.